maybe the tide's beginning to turn, because Cambridge University has been forced to drop rules that have been requiring students, lecturers and visitors to, quote, respect opposing views after overwhelming opposition from dons, from the academics at Cambridge. The plans to force respect on opposing views may have meant that people were forbidden. Well, in fact, many people say it did mean that people were forbidden to criticise others' views publicly. They were no platformed, weren't they? They were turned away. They weren't allowed to make speeches, make addresses, post messages. And this change will make no platforming, preventing speakers with contentious views from speaking, much harder. They will now be allowed, provided they're not being libelous or slanderous, and they're not breaking the law, or there are good legal reasons for them to be challenged and not allowed to speak. But other than that, they can pretty much say what they want. Well, Matthew Parris is a former Conservative MP and, of course, a columnist, writes in the Spectator magazine now that the freedom to offend is vital for a functioning democracy. And he joins me now. Well, you must have given 3 cheers for this when you read about this morning, Matthew.
Yeah, I'm absolutely delighted. And I'm delighted it's a very substantial majority by which the idea has been overturned. Maybe, Richard, I could just explain why the idea was so unacceptable.
Yeah, sure.
Most people, I suppose, would think, well, what's wrong with respect? Surely we should all speak with respect. We should deal with other people's point of view with respect. What's wrong with requiring that? The problem with requiring that was, say you, Richard, believe that the Earth is in fact being ruled by giant lizard people.
How did you know I thought that?
I was to say,
yeah.
This is a ridiculous theory. Only fools could believe in this lizard theory. It can't be right. And you were to say, by saying that, you have made me feel unsafe. You have made me feel hurt, scorned, and offended, and I don't feel safe any longer because you have criticised my point of view. Once you've said that you don't feel safe, I am then disrespecting you if I repeat my point of view. So what you do by requiring respect is you give to other people the ability to block points of view that they say make them feel unsafe.
Yes.
And basically, anybody can say they're made unsafe by any point of view.
How do you think we've got to this position, which thank goodness, because of this decision by this collective group of dons, seems to be being pushed back at last after a long time of a constant encroachment into free speech. How do you think that's happened? What's in terms of social psychology on university campuses? What's happened to make students there so sensitive to opinions and views which they don't hold?
Well, I wish I knew, and I think I share the sense of bewilderment that most of Britain feels that in universities and in academic circles, people have been so easily intimidated and so easily made to toe the line, and that people have not spoken out against deplatforming or cancelling speakers. I think the academic world it's though large, it's quite a closed community, and once ideas go viral there, and this idea of respect and this idea of safe spaces for people with particular points of view, once it gains a grip in an academic community, it must be quite hard to shake off. But I don't know how it feels to be at a university, and much of Britain, I think, probably doesn't understand why either. I mean, to most people in Britain, and I mean about 95% of people in Britain, the idea that you would no platform a speaker whose points of view were not sort of racist or horrible or violent. No. It just goes against our whole idea of a university.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, let me quote one of the dons. Quite a few of them have been speaking out in the wake of this decision to explain it. One of the senior dons has said this. This is a quote from this morning's papers. A lot of people nowadays feel as if they're living in an atmosphere where there are witch hunts constantly going on, a sort of academic version of Salem in the 17th century or the McCarthyite era. And this goes to what you were saying at the opening here, Matthew. If a view is idiotic, we should be quite free to say that view is idiotic. If a religious or political or other position is a tissue of bigotry and superstition, then we should be free to say those things without fear that somebody could find it disrespectful. So given that there really are out there, these dons, I mean, this isn't a fudge, this is a really, really crystal clear judgment. Do you think it'll spread to other universities?
I hope so. And the fact that it's Cambridge, which is one of our leading universities, obviously, the fact that it's Cambridge, I think will set a really good lead. I think there's a great need now for pushback against, I hate to use the word woke, because sometimes woke just means be polite, and
sure.
I don't want to be impolite, but I think it's time for a pushback, and I think that Cambridge might be leading it. It would be an excellent thing.
I noticed another quote from the former Guardian editor, Alan Rusbridger. He was quizzed on free speech by House of Lords Human Rights Committee yesterday. He was withering, absolutely withering. And here's, for me, the plum quote. He said, if you have undergraduates who are saying that we don't feel, this is quoting them, we don't feel powerful enough to take on arguments, then I think you have a problem. And that's true, isn't it? It's where we've got to, and where hopefully we're pushing back from now, is almost an expression of willful ignorance, isn't it? It's like putting your fingers in your ears and saying, no, oh, Sir Jasper, do not touch me.
Yes, and it's great to hear Alan Rusbridger, a former editor of The Guardian, as you say that, because Suzanne Moore, a columnist for The Guardian, has just resigned. It sounds very much as though she was virtually drummed out by the newspaper because people objected to something she'd said, years and years ago. So the Guardian has somewhat lost its way since Alan Rusbridger was editor.
What's your feeling about that, about people being judged on things that they said in good faith and in a different time when sensitivities may have been a little different, say 20 years ago, 25 years ago, which they may now have changed their mind, or they may have adjusted or adapted their opinion? Do you think it's fair to judge people by things that they said a long time ago?
Well, I think it's fair to ask them whether they still think that. And Suzanne Moore, to be fair to both sides of the argument, refuses to renounce things she said in the past, not necessarily because she believes them any longer, but because she doesn't like the whole business of digging up things people have said in the past and asking them for a public renunciation. And that is slightly McCarthyite. It is slightly Salem, Massachusetts. It's witchcraft. You find something silly that someone has once said, and you say to them, unless you give a public apology for what you've said, you're going to be held to it. It's not a world I want to live in.
And I wonder what you think about the role of social media in this. I mean, I think that's really informed no platforming and these witch hunts as they've been described. I mean, I saw a wonderful cartoon in Private Eye a while ago. It was 2 frames. On the left-hand frame, it shows an image of what looked like sort of phantoms and monsters floating through the air, screaming and wailing and gnashing their teeth and shaking their fists. And the caption was, "What the press thinks a Twitter storm looks like." And then the next drawing was of a sort of a rather plump middle-aged man in rather grimy underpants, just sitting alone on a chair with his laptop on his knees going tap, 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 tap. And the caption was, "And what a Twitter storm really looks like." I just wonder if social media has helped to exaggerate, actually, this comet's tail of almost hysteria when people are no platformed.
Oh, it absolutely has. I write for the Times, and beneath my
I enjoy your columns, Matthew.
Readers can, they can post their opinions. And if I was to form my view of what the readership of the Times is like from some of the people who post beneath columns, I would get a very skewed view of the newspaper. And people do have sleepless nights because 100 people have attacked them on social media, not realizing that there are 100 billion people who haven't attacked them on social media. I think there is at least light at the end of this tunnel. In the end, we shall all have said such stupid things at some point or other on social media that we'll all just cancel each other out completely or ban each other completely. There is a hope, I think, that people on social media will eventually so devalue what you say on social media because so many people have said so many things that we all just shrug our shoulders and say, what the hell, it was a long time ago.
Absolutely. And as far as that, as you mentioned, the comments you get under your column, and obviously if you're in the business of broadcasting in the way that I'm doing it now, sometimes I sit in for Piers Morgan on Good Morning Britain, you simply mustn't look at your Twitter feed when you finish the programme because, you won't sleep. And actually I don't, and it doesn't bother me. It really doesn't, because I completely agree with you. J.K. Rowling was in the papers today. She was quoted as saying that actually, reading the publicity surrounding her comments on trans, you would have expected her to be in bits. But she said actually the support she's had, it's about 95%, has been positive support and agreement for what she said. And actually it's a very small but very, very vociferous minority who've taken her on.
I think that we columnists and broadcasters must not ourselves be snowflakes, and we must understand that we're going to get all kinds of abuse.
Hear.
And we must learn to shrug our shoulders. But there is a little bit of a difference, I suspect, between men and women. A lot of men actually quite enjoy a scrap. I love a scrap. Online beneath the Times, I try and give as good as I get with some of my critics. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't keep me awake.
Good.
But quite a lot of women I have noticed who are just generally a bit more rational, a bit more polite in the way that they approach argument, and who don't like fighting for fighting's sake, are, I think, more disturbed by this than men are. And that doesn't make the men right or the women wrong, but I think it is sometimes a difference between the sexes.
Interesting observation. Matthew Parris, Times columnist, thank you very much for your time. Enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.